Have all members voted? Does any member nays? This vote, the yeas are 207, the nays are 219. The motion is not adopted. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Madam Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 774, and I ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 44, House Resolution 774. Resolved that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill, H.R. 5376, to provide for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of Senate Concurrent Resolution 14. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. An amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 117-18, modified by the amendment printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution, shall be considered as adopted. The bill, as amended, shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill, as amended, are waived. The previous question shall be considered as order on the bill, as amended, and not any further amendment thereto. To final passage without intervening motion except one. 2 hours of debate equally divided among and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Budget or their respective designees, and the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means or their respective designees. And 2, one motion to recommit. Section 2, House Resolution 188, agreed to March 8, 2021, as most recently amended by House Resolution 716, agreed to October 12, 2021, is amended by striking November 18, 2021, each place it appears and inserting, in each instance, December 3, 2021.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I raise a point of order against consideration of the resolution because the resolution waives all points of order against consideration of H.R. 5376. The resolution is therefore in violation of Section 426 of the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act of 1995, prohibiting the consideration of a rule waiving the application of Section 425 of the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act of 1995.
The gentleman from Missouri makes a point of order that the resolution violates Section 426A of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974. The gentleman has met the threshold burden under the rule, and the gentleman from Missouri and a member opposed will each control 10 minutes. on the question of consideration. Following debate, the chair will put the question of consideration as the statutory means of disposing of the point of order, and the chair will now recognize the gentleman in Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have seen a circus here for the last 7 hours. 7 hours. We saw history. The longest vote held in this body in modern history. A motion to adjourn, just so some backroom agreement could be made. This point of order the whole purpose of it is to make sure that this budget bill that is before us, before there's a vote, that we know the true cost of this agreement from the Congressional Budget Office. That is what the rules are. We know that there's more than 150 different programs being created in this legislation. And we know that there's a lot of numerous different possibilities of unfunded mandates that would go to the states, that would go to individuals. And before there's a vote on this bill, a vote on this rule, we need to make sure that there is a Congressional Budget Office score. It does not need to violate the House rules and federal statute by forcing through this piece of legislation without knowing exactly the cost. And Madam Speaker, I would like to enter into the record a letter that was sent to the Speaker of the House from 5 different Democrats of this body following our lead, what we just said here, that there should not be a vote. There should not be a vote on this bill until the Congressional Budget Office does a score.
Order.
Thank you. I hope that the 5 members that's on this letter to the Speaker will follow through with the same commitment that they allowed on November 2nd. And to make sure that the American people get a valid, transparent score so that they know what is exactly in this piece of legislation. We know it's the largest spending bill in the history of the United States. We just don't know exactly how much. It's at least $4.5 trillion, but we don't have the congressional scorecards of doing it. With that, I will reserve the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
I claim time in opposition, and I reserve my time.
Gentleman. No, the gentleman's recognized and reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you once again to my good friend, Ranking Member Smith. You know, it was just 4 short years ago, that Speaker Pelosi tweeted, and I quote, "Republicans shouldn't vote without an updated CBO score," end quote. Those were the Speaker's own words 4 years ago. The Speaker even doubled down later in that tweet. She accused Republicans of attempting to, and I quote, "jam this bill through without an updated CBO score of its impacts," end quote. Again, that was the Speaker 4 years ago. So apparently the Speaker has forgotten those words because later today, Democrats plan to ram through this big government tax and spend proposal with no information from the nonpartisan CBO about the true cost and the true economic impact their spending spree will have on the American people. So I guess it's fair to say that the Speaker subscribes to that age-old adage, do as I say, not as I do. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you. I yield 2.5 minutes to the lady from Iowa.
Gentlelady's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Missouri for yielding today. Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to this massive tax and spend plan that was only posted late last night. This entire process has been a sham. It's been full of nothing but partisanship, disrespect for taxpayers, and late-night and all-day antics. No wonder my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are in disarray. Late last night, the 2,100-page bill was finally posted. We certainly have not had adequate time to fully read or digest what's in it, let alone figure out how much it's going to cost my constituents. Iowans deserve to know how much of their hard-earned paychecks are going to be wasted on frivolous, misguided priorities like funding for butterflies or desert fish, and my constituents are busy trying to put food on their tables, provide for their kids, and keep their family farms operating. But no, we can't even get the most basic information. We don't have an official cost estimate from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Instead, we have nonsense numbers, totally made up numbers, handed down from the White House in the middle of the night. That is not how we govern responsibly in this body. I came to Washington, D.C. to be an advocate for taxpayers, to make sure that Iowans' voices are heard, and to bring a little bit of that Iowa common sense to the Capitol. This place clearly needs it. Working families in Iowa sit around their kitchen tables. They talk about what's important to them. They build a budget that fits within their means, and they stick to it. I know what that's like. Moms across this country know what that's like. It's not easy. We have to make hard choices. And frankly, it's disrespectful and embarrassing that we are even having this debate right now. How can we spend taxpayers' money without even knowing how much we are spending? In the Speaker's own words, we shouldn't vote without a CBO score. I agree. Americans deserve to know the impact legislation will have on their lives. The best estimates that we have, which don't even include all of the provisions that Speaker Pelosi stuffed in there last night, ring up in the trillions. Trillions. We're spending approximately trillions of dollars on nonsense priorities when Iowans are dealing with real challenges. And we can't even give them the respect of waiting for a proper cost estimate. This bill bankrupts the economy. It benefits the wealthy, and it builds bureaucracy. It's a bust. Vote no. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Of course, we've heard repeatedly from the President of the United States this bill costs nothing. That's obviously not true. It costs lots of money. Last night, my very good friend, the Rules Committee Chairman, distinguished member from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, said it's fully paid for. I know he believes that. Unfortunately, he doesn't know that. We don't have a Congressional Budget Committee score. We've had 5 members of the other parties say they would not vote for this bill unless they had a CBO score. So I hope they hold true to that. So, Madam Speaker, we should simply not proceed until we have a CBO score. We'll have our differences of opinion, fair enough. But the American people and all of us in this chamber ought to know what this bill costs before any of us are asked to cast a vote. So I would urge the support of my friend's point of order, and with that, Madam Speaker, I would yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I reclaim the remaining time. Madam Speaker, it has been quite a Groundhog Day when you watch what's been going on with this legislation over and over. It started out with a 2,400-page bill. Last Thursday, a new 1,700-page bill was dropped. This week on Wednesday, an additional 2,135-page bill was dropped, and none of the bills have been completely scored. But what we do know, after 11 p.m. last night, they made additional changes to the bill, the 2,135 bill that was dropped on Wednesday. And you know what their priorities in those changes was? To give millionaires larger tax breaks. That was their priority. To give already millionaires larger tax breaks. They try to tell you that this legislation is about the kids and the babies and it's all about the children. That's a bunch of hogwash, Madam Speaker. This bill is all about giving tax breaks to the millionaires. The largest portion in this bill, over $300 billion, goes towards their tax breaks for millionaires. They don't want to score because they don't want the American people to see the giveaways that they are giving to the most wealthy at the expense of the working class. That is unacceptable. We need to make sure that the only thing that's bipartisan in this legislation is bipartisan opposition. There's bipartisan support to make sure that this bill is scored before a vote, to make sure that the American people knows what's in this bill. Don't you dare try to sneak this through. Don't you dare. The people of the United States deserve the huge tax break you're giving your millionaires in this legislation. With that, I hope the 5 Democrats that sent this letter to the Speaker joins with us and make sure that we know how much the price tag is in this legislation, in this proposal, so we can tell everyday working class Americans how much their cost of goods are going to be going up because of the reckless, irresponsible spending of the people on that side of the aisle. With that, I yield back.
The chair will remind all members to address their remarks to the chair. Chair will now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And let me first begin by suggesting, and I say this seriously, that the gentleman from Missouri take a chill pill. We ought to be able to discuss serious matters without getting hysterical and yelling and screaming all the time. The American people expect us to debate issues, serious issues, seriously. First of all, let me just say this is another tactic to try to derail an effort to help reduce premiums for more than 9 million Americans, lower prescription drug costs, ensure that seniors never pay more than $2,000 a year for their drugs under Medicare Part D. This is an effort by my Republican friends to derail a bill that would lower insulin prices. It offers access to universal and free preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds, which would save American families an average of $8,600 per year per child. That's what they're fighting against here. This effort by my Republican friends is an attempt to derail a bill that would support the construction of affordable homes, boost our housing supply, deliver much-needed rental and down payment assistance to our constituents. It would enhance and expand home energy and efficiency tax credits. It would bolster our domestic supply chains, creates thousands of new good-paying jobs right here in the United States of America. It would make historic investments in coastal restoration, forest management, and soil conservation, provides resources to reduce emissions and support our farmers, creates a diverse new workforce through the establishment of the Civilian Climate Corps, which will conserve our land and improve resilience. Now, my friends on the other side of the aisle, we're talking about the cost. They're worried about the cost. Boy, it's nice that they finally worry about the cost of things. They rammed through a tax cut bill for the wealthy, for billionaires, for big corporations, and they never paid for it. It added $2 trillion to our debt. Where were they then? But here's the good news, Madam Speaker. This bill is fully paid for. The Joint Committee on Taxation and the White House has provided much of the detail.
The House will come to order. The gentleman may continue.
Yeah. So I appreciate the fact that my friends would rather shout than debate, but the American people expect a debate, expect a conversation. And when people, by the way, come to the Rules Committee, they get as much time as they want to be able to speak, and we welcome the diversity of opinion. Madam Speaker, we also know that the Build Back Better bill will not become law without a CBO score. It will not go through the Senate without a CBO score, so that will be coming, and my friends know that. So look, the bottom line is they're not upset. This is a red herring. They're not concerned about a CBO score. They're not concerned about costs. They never have been in the past on any of their legislative priorities that benefit the well-off and the well-connected, mean, the idea that somehow that they're fighting for the middle class or those struggling to get in the middle class. Give me a break. I mean, people know the record of my Republican friends. They know the priorities of the Republican Congress. They know the priorities of the previous occupant of the White House. So nobody buys that this is about protecting the middle class, because most of my friends on the other side of the aisle never gave a damn about the middle class or those struggling to get into the middle class. So this is an effort to try to basically derail or stall or obstruct all the things that I mentioned. So, Madam Speaker, there is no merit to what my friends are complaining about here today, but they will complain, and they have a right to do so, and we will, grin and bear it. But at the end of the day, we will deliver for the American people. We have two major pieces of legislation that we want to get enacted into law. One is the Build Back Better initiative, which I just talked about all the priorities in it. The other is the infrastructure bill that was bipartisan over the Senate. Maybe we'll see if it's bipartisan over here. I hope so. But it is about investing in our roads and our bridges and our water and our sewer facilities, of giving America basically a facelift, because we have neglected our infrastructure for too long. And here's the difference. When they were in charge, when the previous occupant of the White House was in charge, we got infrastructure weeks and infrastructure months and infrastructure press releases, but no money, no resources to help build one single infrastructure project. That is going to change with this majority and this president. So, Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to reject what my friends are peddling here today and vote yes on the question of consideration. With that, I yield back my time.
All time for debate has expired, and the question now occurs: will the House consider the resolution? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Gentleman from Missouri.
I demand the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. You guys. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Cawthorn, North Carolina, inform the House that Mr. Cawthorn will vote no on the question of the consideration. As a member designated by Mr. Babin, great state of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. Babin will vote no on the question of consideration.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Jim Hagedorn, Mr. Hagedorn will vote no on the question to reconsider 774.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Walorski of Indiana, I inform the House that Ms. Walorski will vote no on the question of consideration. And as a member designated by Mr. Bouchon of Indiana, I inform the House that Mr. Bouchon will vote no on the question of consideration.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Donald Payne, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will vote yes on consideration of the resolution. As the member designated by Mr. Albio Series, I inform the House that Mr. Series will vote yes on consideration of the resolution.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Brooks of Alabama, I inform the House that Mr. Brooks will vote no in the question of consideration.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Lawson, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yes on H Resolution 774.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois rise?
As a member designated by Mr. Meeks of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Meeks will vote yes on consideration of the resolution. As a member designated by Ms. Sewell of Alabama, I inform the House that Ms. Sewell will vote yes on consideration of the resolution.
For what purpose is the gentlelady from Illinois rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Demings of Florida, I inform the House that Ms. Demings will vote yes on consideration of the resolution.
Who's he from? For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Bilirakis of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Bilirakis will vote nay on the question of consideration. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Clark of New York, I inform the House that Ms. Clark will vote yes on consideration of the resolution.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Van Dyne of Texas and pursuant to House Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Van Dyne will vote no on this question.
Crawford will vote nay on the question of consideration.
Pursuant to House Resolution 8, I announce the House that Representative Crenshaw votes no on the question of consideration of the resolutions.
No on the question of consideration of the resolution. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Cuellar of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. Cuellar will vote yea on the consideration of the resolution.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is great to be back here at NASA Goddard
For what purpose? For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition? No. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Yarmouth of Kentucky, and inform the House that Mr. Yarmouth will vote yes on consideration of the resolution.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Cardenas, I inform the House that Mr. Cardenas will vote aye on consideration of the resolution. As the member designated by Mr. Vicente Gonzalez, I inform the House that Mr. Vicente Gonzalez will vote aye on consideration of the resolution. As the member designated by Mr. Swalwell, I inform the House that Mr. Swalwell will vote aye on the consideration of the resolution.
Morning. Can you believe the vote is still open? You know, we made history today. This is the longest vote held open in the history of Congress, just because they don't have the votes for the bill today. We're moments away from voting on a 2,145-page bill. Advanced in the dead of night, finalized a few hours ago, and not one person in this body has read it. Only 10% of Americans say they know what is in this bill, according to a CBS poll, but I bet that percentage is even smaller on the Democratic conference. The Congressional Budget Office has not shown the American people exactly how much this bill will cost, as required by the Congressional Budget Act and the rules of our House. And the CBO reports that they will only arrive as American families get an enormous receipt from their Thanksgiving dinner. There will not be a CBO score until Thanksgiving. One clue we have of the price tag, however, comes from Wharton School. Their budget model, it states that the true cost of the Democrats' bill is $4 trillion. That's twice as high as Democrats have advertised, or even 4 times, because the president says it costs nothing. Are members of Congress even aware of this estimate? While Democrats' reconciliation plan has no transparency, Tuesday's results show an important truth. Voters from Virginia to Texas to Seattle to Minneapolis to New Jersey sent a mandate to their elected officials. Stop catering to the progressive left and work on solutions that will improve the lives of your constituents. Even the New York Times editorial board agrees. Elements of the reconciliation plan are part of a sharp leftward push in the party. The New York Times agrees. You got thousands to millions of voters who just gave you a very clear message. And where are the Democrats today? Breaking their own rules, setting new records of just keeping votes open, and trying to intimidate and bully members to vote for something. Why? So Speaker Pelosi can get on her jet and go to Europe for the 3rd time in 3 months. They really should be working on fixing our supply chain crisis, but the Democratic policies will create even more disruptions by shipping more of our businesses overseas. It appears congressional Democrats want to do everything possible to continue to make things worse. The vote today is rushed and irresponsible. It just continues to raise the question of a speaker. Is she more concerned of just being a lame duck, getting on her farewell tour, or working for the American public? You know, it's been said many times that shame me once, shame on you. Shame me twice, shame on me. In 2009, the Democrats got this exact same message from Virginia and New Jersey voters. And 4 days later, Nancy Pelosi did the exact same thing. Rushed a vote on Obamacare, and 63 Democrats lost their seat just a year from then. I would think people would learn from that. You have rules of the House that you have to know what a bill will do and what it will cost. You have members on the Democratic side who said they would never vote for it unless they were able to read it. You have a leadership that's pushing and trying to intimidate. You have an American public that is pushing back, saying focus on the challenges, the rising cost, the inflation. It's created mainly by Democrats' push earlier this year on their trillions of dollars of spending when we warned them not to. A border that is open, rising gasoline prices and looking to OPEC to solve the problem instead of allowing American jobs and American workers to solve it. And all today, they want to rush through a bill that will cost $4 trillion and bring more harm and damage to the problems they've already created. With that, let's open it up for questions. Yes, ma'am.
Two quick questions. The first, kind of short term, this motion to adjourn, will you keep bringing that to the floor? And then long term, if this bill does pass the House, the Senate, and if you do take back control, will you try to repeal any parts of it?
Well, we would try to repeal anything that's damaging to the American public. Anything that would incentivize American manufacturing go to another country. Anything that would harm the workers of America, that would make them lose their job. Anything that would harm the supply chain, that would allow China to become stronger and America to become weaker. There's so many problems within this bill. I do not believe, even if it passed the House today, that it could pass the Senate. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yes. For Catholics and other believers out there, the Hyde Amendment still does not remain in the bill. Your reaction to that?
You know, for 50 years, Republicans and Democrats agreed that that was the law of the land. Regardless of how you felt about abortion, you shouldn't spend taxpayers' money, hardworking taxpayer money, on funding an abortion. What a tremendous shift that this Democratic Party has become. More of a socialist wing it shows in their policies, and that's exactly one. I would be shocked if the number of Democrats who have always defended the Hyde Amendment, even the president himself, now to change their position really makes you wonder. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not asking you about Trump. But will it be difficult for Republicans to campaign next year and for messaging against free preschool, child care assistance, elder care? Is it going to be more difficult for Republicans after this bill passes?
Well, I never imagined anything's free. It has to be paid for. And what's interesting to me in the Democrats' plan for child care, they're saying the child care worker has to have a college degree. They're going to create, just like they did in the supply chain problem, you're going to have fewer child care opportunities out there. It was interesting when they asked Congressman Cartwright about this on television. He said, "Oh, I didn't read that part of the bill." It goes to the fundamental question here. Why would they push something through without even having a score on their own rules? I don't think it'll be hard for Republicans to campaign against this bill at all. The damage that is done, we warned them earlier when they took the majority not to take the path they were doing, and lo and behold, what's happened a year later. We have inflation like we haven't seen in years. We have a border that is no longer secure, where people on the terrorist watch list are being caught coming across this border. We've got prices of gasoline that haven't been this high since the last time Biden was in office. And his only answer is he can't solve it quickly, but he looks to OPEC. He shuts down American pipelines but allows Putin to have his own pipeline, which now he's playing politics with, and bringing his armies to the border of Ukraine. Would he ever do that if he questioned the strength of America? You have China now questioning, where they're openly talking about in the reports I read yesterday in the paper, of maybe taking an island or two that Taiwan controls. You have America in doubt in this process, all because of the policies of the Democrats taking the majority. You've just had an election this week. It wasn't just about Virginia, New Jersey, Minneapolis, Seattle, Texas, a seat that Biden won by 13 points that's 73% Hispanic and a Republican just carried. It is no doubt Republicans will have no problem campaigning, but they won't be campaigning alone. Independents and Democrats will join with them in changing the direction of this nation, just like they did last Tuesday.
But if Democrats...
Yes.
Just curious, how many House Republicans will be able to campaign on the fact that they voted for the bipartisan infrastructure bill?
I think it'd be very difficult for a Republican to campaign on that because it's viewed as one bill. It's what the Democrats are doing. If they bring it up today, they bring it up as one bill. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Leader. You talked about lessons learned from the most recent races. Would you counsel some of your fellow Republicans in tough races to follow the Youngkin model of trying to keep the former president at a distance in maybe swing districts? And would you also counsel the former president that that may be a good idea for him to distance in some of those competitive races?
I don't see how the president distanced himself. He endorsed Youngkin in the primary. He did a telephone town hall for him to get the vote out, and we found that the vote got out big. You know, Democrat turnout was pretty close to the same. The Republican turnout is what was larger. I give a lot of credit to the campaign Youngkin ran. You know what he ran on? Policies. In the closing days, you know what he talked about? Making the DMV work. He talked about parents having a say in their kids' education. It was a great contrast to what the Democrats are doing. So it was a party more united and adding more people to it. In the last election, Speaker Pelosi bragged that they would win 15 seats. The pollsters said the Democrats would win 15 seats in the House. They got the number right, the party wrong. For the first time since 1994, not one Republican incumbent lost. And we beat the Democrats, and every single Democrat lost to a Republican woman or a Republican minority. We did that with President Trump on the ticket and with the help of President Trump. Just as new governor Glenn Youngkin will fight and help Republicans win the majority, so will President Trump. And I think at the same time, you're going to find the party expand. This is about addition, not subtraction. And what's driving more people to these policies is they're seeing the failed policies of what the Democrats have provided us.
Leader McCarthy.
Every American is going to find out in a very short time period that their Thanksgiving is going to be the most expensive they've ever witnessed. Every week they find out when they go to the gas station how much more it costs because of these policies. And I think it's going to be an easy campaign for Republicans to bring more people to the party.
Mr. Leader.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Leader, thanks. I'm wondering what you make of the idea in the current Democratic draft of a parole system for some undocumented immigrants, where there would not be a path to citizenship, but there could be a 5-year or whatever year parole. Is that a solution you would consider, given obviously there'd be a lot of discussion about
No,
the details?
why would you ever do an immigration bill in reconciliation when you know the Senate parliamentarian told you it's not? Because you're trying to buy off votes. I'm one who believes the immigration system in America is broken. So why don't we have an immigration bill based just upon immigration reform?
But that
And why would we
concept-
first accord?
But outside of reconciliation, just as a concept, a status that wouldn't be a path to citizenship.
Oh, I've talked about that before. That's if somebody has come here under the age of 18 and has come here illegally, about working towards a path towards legal status, not to citizenship. But you would never do legislation like that inside reconciliation. What's happening is, throughout the night, Speaker Pelosi is trying to buy off 3 or 4 votes. What's it today? What's it the next day? And poor Josh, that guy's been promised so much. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy. I mean, I don't know how many signed on the letter that he would never vote for a reconciliation bill until the BIF was passed. Well, he voted for a reconciliation bill to start. He deemed it, not even to debate it. She won bigger. And then every time she pulls that football out from under him, we're going to vote on it this week. I don't know how many bottles of champagne we have sent him, but I feel bad for that poor guy. But if she can do that time and again with groups of 3 and 4 to promise you something and then you vote for it, but what she's doing to the American public right now is she's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. The rules of the House is the Congressional Budget Office has to tell you how much it costs. This is going to be the largest bill in the history of America. Largest tax increase, largest funding. And she wants to ram it through simply because she wants to go to her 3rd trip to Europe in 3 months for her farewell tour. I don't know how many more countries she can hit. And not allow the American public to even know what's in this bill, let alone those who vote for it? Why does she think she can do it? Because she did it the last time they lost the majority. Yes, sir.
Mr. Leader, you talked about high inflation, high gas prices, and I did fill my tank up this morning, and gas was a little bit higher, but I wanted to ask you about...
A little bit higher than what, last
higher
week?
than last year. Okay,
Yeah.
higher than last year.
How much did you spend?
It was $3.46, I believe.
Come to California. You know what you spend out there? You're almost $5 a gallon.
My question is, what did you make of this morning's unemployment numbers, the job numbers? More than 500,000 jobs created in the month of October. Is that a good sign for the Biden economy?
That's great. That's great for America. Well, to the Bidens, I don't know. They've been utilizing their poor job numbers to say why they need Build Back Better. So if this was the case today, why would you need the bill? Yes, ma'am.
Paid family leave, I know that's something Ivanka Trump has advocated for, some Republicans have been supportive of. If it does get stripped out of the Build Back Better framework, is that something that Republicans would be willing to negotiate as a standalone?
Look, I think the very first thing that has to happen is reconciliation has to fail. What Republicans want to be able to do is make sure people can have daycare and have it in a manner that it works well. You look at the child tax credit, Republicans did put it within their bill. But one thing that the Democrats do fundamentally different, and this is what's harmed a lot, just like when they would take unemployment that Republicans support, but then they would add another $15 an hour beyond what your state did to encourage people to stay home, not go back to work. In their plan, they take away the work requirement. In their plan, they expand it where 90% of all Americans actually can attain it. So you can get a check every single day. And in their latest plan, if I'm correct, they don't require any Social Security numbers. So what they're doing is American hard-earned working taxpayer money would pay for people who are non-Americans as well. So it'd create many problems and incentivize many problems throughout. And I think it'd be a long way before we negotiate. Yes, sir.
Sir, you talked about how what's going on raises questions about Speaker Pelosi. What does it say about President Biden's agenda?
What do you mean? I don't understand your
Well,
question.
you've been saying that whatever is going on at the moment reflects on Speaker Pelosi and her.
No, it reflects on all
her
the
legacy.
Democrats.
What does it say about President Biden's agenda here with this bill that
No,
Democrats
it's a failed policy. Let's walk through. I appreciate the question. So let's walk through. What does it say about President Biden's policies? Okay. Well, let's first look at his foreign policy in Afghanistan. He lied to the Americans who were there that they could come down. He wouldn't return the phone calls to our foreign allies who had their own troops and citizens there because America had been attacked 20 years prior. He would tell us to come to the airport, the Americans who were there, and his own administration 30 minutes later said, no, it's not safe. The Bagram air base that he closed down had a prison on there where ISIS-K was. The suicide bomber that killed those 13 American servicemen and women came from that prison, from being opened up. He told us that there was only a few Americans left. Now we find out, no, there's hundreds of Americans still there. That's failed. He told us that he was going to secure the border. We now that it's not more than 1.4 million people in countermeasures illegal coming across. He told us when the public finally was able to see the hundreds of people sitting underneath a highway that he was going to send them back. We found that he lied to the American in the dead of night, would ship people around the country. Not one of them being tested for COVID in a time that he's asking the rest of Americans. He says in his policies as well that if you're here and you're illegally, that you cannot, law enforcement cannot come and arrest you in certain places inside America. But Americans can still be arrested in those places. He told us that Americans cannot have a pipeline that would produce 1 million jobs and environmentally sound to be able to move our gas and our oil in a more environmentally friendly way down to be produced in Texas. He lied to and broke a treaty with Canada, and it also hurt Mexico within our region, but it hurt American jobs. But he allowed Putin to produce a new pipeline inside Europe, which Putin is now using it for the exact same reason, to have influence inside Europe and building troops along the Ukraine border. He now asked, as gasoline prices rise to a level they haven't in 7 years, that he writes a letter to OPEC to produce more, but tells the producers in America they can't because he shuts them off of federal land. When parents come before the school board meetings, because with COVID, they can now see on Zoom what's being taught in their schools, and they want to know what's being taught to their children, He asked the Attorney General to go and investigate the parents. Every element of his philosophy and policy has been a failure. And it's not my opinion. It's the opinion of the millions of people who just voted last Tuesday to send him a very clear message. But Nancy Pelosi and President Biden are tied together, because 2 times he's come down to these chambers and asked people to vote for those failed policies. He has his members who work for him in the administration down here trying to influence. He has his administration, his cabinet members, calling, trying to influence Democrats to vote for it, even though they don't have a score on what it costs or what it would do to this country. So yes, I have a long opinion, but it's not just my opinion. And it's not just in America, it's around the world. So we're trying to change the course. We're trying to build back that America could actually have jobs in America and not put a tax code that punishes people. You know, if they are successful in this, just their global minimum tax will make it more competitive to move your business overseas. When we were able to change the tax code last time, you had no inversions. You had people moving their businesses from overseas here. I remember I was in a school one day and I was talking about the competitiveness of America and how it's been more competitive by other countries when we were trying to do our tax code. And this one student raised his hand and he said, "How did America fall behind?" And I asked him if he played any sports, and he said he was a swimmer. I said, "Well, let me give you an analogy based upon swimming. Picture America after World War II, and we're at a swim meet competing with every other country. We jump in the pool, not only do we win, we dry off before second and third arrives. Well, when the next year comes, we think a lot of countries got damaged more than we did during World War II, so we should probably raise the taxes on America or provide greater foreign aid, put a weight belt on about 5 pounds. And every year we add another weight belt. So pretty soon, we got a 50-pound weight belt on. And you know what? We no longer win. And the rest of the world looks around and says, why don't you swim like you used to? What we really have to do is remove the weight belt. With the reconciliation is bigger than a 50-pound weight belt. Not only will it make us not win, it'll make us sink. It will enhance other countries' ability to be more competitive than America. So I have strong opinions about his policies. Yes.
Leader McCarthy, if Democrats pass the Build Back Better bill, it will continue child tax credit payments through next year, but then it would expire at the end of next year. And so what would be your position then? Would you want to continue it with changes or let it expire?
The great thing about in Congress is we have to make decisions about everything, not a little silo point. We don't have all the money in the world. We'd have to look at it, prioritize what we would spend our money best on for the future. It just goes to show with your question is exactly what the Wharton School was saying, that the president is not telling the truth, that this bill does cost. It costs $4 trillion. There's a reason why they want to run the bill through without having a Congressional Budget Office tell you how much it costs. There are gimmicks behind this. It's even why the New York Times criticizes it as well. It's really interesting. From the New York Times to the Wharton School to the millions of people have voted, you would think as though that they would wake up and chart a new course.
So
yes.
you'd let it expire then?
I'm sorry.
I said it's not before us today. We're not in the majority, but that's a good hypothetical and good try.
From a colleague, Mr. Leader, House Republicans are sponsoring a bill that would limit the DOJ's ability to make these settlement payments to families that have been separated at the border. Does Congress have the authority to prevent the Department of Justice from making these payouts? And what do you make of President Biden saying that's not going to happen?
Okay, the first question is, yes, we have a bill up. Yes, I co-sponsored it. And yes, Congress has the right and authority to do that. Secondly, what do I think of the president saying that's not going to happen, but then his White House walk it back the very next day and say, yes, he's supportive of it? It just goes to show to the earlier question. Many times President Biden tells us one thing that doesn't seem to be truthful with his own administration taking action for another. The only thing that will happen if that is the case, he'll give greater incentive to more ability of people coming across here illegally. It'll do a greater incentive to Americans to question what is going on in this administration. And one of my biggest fears, and I brought this point to you many times, and I think you should ask this question because they're not providing the information anymore. Why would two people on the terrorist watch list from Yemen, and you cover from California, why would they come in illegally from Mexico to California on different days? Who are they talking to? What do they have planned, and why are they here? There are other people that I'm told that have been caught, don't know, but they won't provide us the information on the terrorist watch list. More than 160 countries people come from. You just had the mishap in Afghanistan. We had more than 5,000 prisoners of some of the worst people get out. We've watched what their actions have been just in a few days, where they killed 13 American men and women, soldiers. My question is, if you keep a border unsecure, you're making America unsecure. Yes, ma'am.
Republicans just filed another motion to adjourn just now. Is that going to keep going on?
Republicans will use every tool in our toolbox to try to save America, to try to stop the reconciliation bill. So there'll be many things we do. Yes, ma'am.
A quick one. Some of your members and many Democrats are planning to go to Scotland for the climate summit. I'm wondering where you are right now on the idea of the kind of central idea of that summit, which is about keeping temperature increased to 1.5 degrees or less on the planet. Do you think that's the correct goal? And how do you think that can be achieved if so?
Well, the one thing I know, I'm not a scientist, but the one thing I know, you're never going to reach there if you don't have China and Russia there as well, and allow them to continue to produce. So I think hydrocarbons are going to be here for quite some time. You've got to have a bridge across. I think natural gas is very clean. I think what President Biden's doing about raising the price in America, make us pay more but still buy it from somewhere else. I think American has the ability, especially when it comes to natural gas. American natural gas is 42% cleaner than Russian natural gas. But all the actions this president is taking, I don't think helps us environmentally. If you watched in the last decade, we lowered our CO2 emissions. And we did it at the same time becoming energy independent. And what else we did was actually lower the cost in America for our consumers. There's a better way to do it through technology and through science than what they're currently doing. All they're doing is causing pain to Americans and making China stronger and allowing China to pollute. Last question.
With regard to the child care in the reconciliation bill, some of the people say that it's an attack on religious liberty because federal funds cannot be used to fund, for a parent to fund their child to go to a religious school. Your reaction on that?
That's wrong. It's just like inside the BIF that they won't allow religious entities to utilize the money as well. It just seems like it's an assault on religion time and again, just from removing the Hyde Amendment, something that people have been able to be a part of. The administration has a lot of things wrong with them. This is one of the tops. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
I guess it's afternoon still. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we have an opportunity to proceed down a path to advance a very historic and transformative agenda. The President's agenda to build back better and also to pass the bipartisan infrastructure framework, create good paying jobs across the country, building the infrastructure of our country with mass transit to help clean the air, with safer bridges for safety for the American people, for broadband to help people communicate better, whether it's distance learning, telemedicine, or commerce, or just family relations. There are many other elements in the legislation that are very important to the success of our economy. But in order to build back better, we want to do that and pass the Build Back Better bill. I call it Build Back Better for women because it makes a big difference in being transformative for women in the workplace. We had hoped to be able to bring both bills to the floor today. Some members want more clarification or validation of numbers that have been put forth, that it's top line, that it is fully paid for, and we honor that request. So today, we hope to pass the BIF and also the rule on Build Back Better with the idea that before Thanksgiving, it should take another week or so to get the numbers that they're requesting. I don't know, that's how long it takes. As we do, then we'll have a Thanksgiving gift for the American people. I do want to thank the Congressional Black Caucus for the creative alternative that they presented today that advances the agenda, to do so in a way that, again, is historic and transformative. With that, I'll yield to the distinguished Democratic Majority Leader, the Majority Leader of the House, Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Jim Clyburn, for the hard work that you and your WHIP organization, but you in particular, have put forward in terms of getting the work done. What is the work? The work is two bills. They are the President's vision of a better and stronger America, a more competitive America, an America that reaches out to its working men and women, its families, to its children, to educate them, to seniors, to make sure that they're cared for properly. These two bills will make, as the President says, a generational change for our country. I believe that the votes today to pass the infrastructure bill and to provide for a path forward by adopting the rule for the passage of the Build Back Better legislation will be a giant step forward. And I am absolutely convinced beyond a doubt that before Thanksgiving, the week of the 15th, we will pass the Build Back Better legislation. All members of our caucus have indicated they're for BIF. Almost every member has indicated, and I believe we will have an overwhelming Democratic vote and pass, on our side of the aisle, the Build Back Better legislation. I'd now like to yield to my friend Jim Clyburn, who's been so important in moving this bill forward. Jim?
Thank you, Leader, and the Speaker for their vision, getting us to where we are today. I think that what we are about to do is hopefully pass a piece of legislation that will be very transformative to many of our communities. If you look at this bill, the so-called infrastructure bill, we see funding that gets us to about 70% of the way with a 100% build-out of broadband in our country. That, to me, is very, very important. You're not going to be able to have the kind of medical care that we need unless we have telehealth and telemedicine. You're not going to have the adequate education for our children unless there's online learning that has to take place. And rural businesses are not going to be able to thrive unless they can have just-in-time delivery of their services and their products. So broadband alone does a big, big deal for me. But if you look at the communities that I represent, rural communities, many of them rural, these communities with this bill get the water, sewage kind of development that need to make these communities attractive for future growth and development. This bill gets us a long ways down that road, and not to mention what it does for our ports. The Charleston port is in my district. Our ports, when you see a state like South Carolina building, now we do more tires in South Carolina than they do in Ohio. And we got Mercedes-Benz, their Sprinter is made in North Charleston. Volvo, and these plants, BMW, they've got to have the ability to get these products out. So this bill, this infrastructure bill, is huge for my state and the communities that I represent. And then that gets us to the rule on Build Back Better. And in Build Back Better, the reason we got to have that bill is because that's where so much of what we need for families to get to where they need to be, for their communities to get to where they need to be. Just take, for instance, children. In that bill is where we make permanent for another year the tax credits for children, tax reduction, I call it, for families with children. These things are very, very important, not to mention the other parts of the family that are taken care of with that bill. And so when I think of what we've got to do for the cost of pharmaceuticals, I try to use the word pharmaceuticals rather than the drugs. The cost of pharmaceuticals, the cost there, it's in Build Back Better. And so I think that there's strong support, if not unanimous support in our caucus for Build Back Better. And so today, for us to do the infrastructure bill, give the president this bill to sign so that he can keep the job growth that we just heard about this morning moving forward, that is a huge deal for us. And then we'll go on to do the rule so we can go home and await these final numbers coming from wherever they've got to come from and do what we need to do to pass that bill sometimes out into the future. And I'll let the speaker tell us when that'll be.
Madam Speaker. Let me just say how important it is to have a rule vote. Once we have the rule vote, we have the path to the floor. And all of our members voting for the rule says that we will pass, as Mr. Hoyer said, we'll pass the bill, and as the distinguished whip said as well. So there's the rule vote. People have to understand this is the threshold. And so we'll cross the threshold that'll take us to that.
Republican votes to pass the bipartisan plan?
Well, we hope to have as many Democrats as possible to pass the bipartisan plan.
Madam Speaker, yes, Madam Speaker,
Yes,
yes. A couple of questions on that. Congresswoman Jayapal came out with a statement indicating that she will not support her caucus, the Progressive Caucus, the infrastructure bill, if it goes without Build Back Better, that she would rather wait until the CBO score comes and that moderates are on board both. Have you spoken to her, and do you have the votes right now for the infrastructure bill?
We all speak to each other quite regularly. In fact, it's not a chance to say I spoke once or twice. It's a constant conversation among all of us in our caucus. And the fact is, we believe it is necessary to pass the BIF so that these jobs can come online as soon as possible. We have waited a while. We had hoped to pass it sooner, but we can't wait too much later for the legislation. I do believe that there are a large number of members of the Progressive Caucus who will vote for the bill. That is my understanding. I whip the members every time. I have my own. No, Mr. Clyburn has the official whip count. I have the Speaker's secret whip count. I don't tell anything that people tell me, not even you, my dear good friends. but I have a pretty good feel.
So you have 218. Do you have 218 votes to pass it?
We'll see, won't we?
Speaker
Yes,
Pelosi,
and-
the inability.
We'll see. Anybody else?
Yeah, Speaker Pelosi, the inability of.
Please, okay.
Then, you know, we have seen this, there's gonna be a vote, okay, there's not gonna be a vote, there's gonna be a vote, there's not gonna be a vote. At a certain point, do you worry that it starts to look like the Democrats can't get out of their own way?
No, welcome to my world. This is the Democratic Party. It is, well, Roger said it very well, where he is. And it is a party whose vitality and diversity is something that we all respect and admire. We are not a lockstep party. We are not just speak as one person and nobody else needs to show up. And that exuberance is the vitality of our party, which we value and treasure and respect the different opinions within our party. One of the challenges that we have, though, because I've been here a long time, as have all three of us, in those days all of this would be done, but not on 24/7 platforms where their opinions going out, characterizations going out before anybody even knew what was going on. So it's an additional challenge, but I see every challenge as an opportunity.
Speaker Pelosi,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
What is your message to progressives who say they will not vote for this infrastructure bill?
For the reasons that Mr. Hoyer and Mr. Clyburn mentioned, we have to weigh the equities in our vote, each and every one of us. And I hope that it would weigh heavily on them, that American people want to see progress in their communities with job creation. But not only that, what those jobs will create in terms of mass transit to protect the air, water projects to protect the water that their children drink, broadband so that we can have fairness in how people learn and buy and sell and get health care online. The list goes on and on, and it's very important that we pass it. So I hope that they would make a judgment on the merits of the legislation.
Speaker Pelosi, thank you. The inability of Democrats to pass this today, what does this show to the American people?
What inability?
The inability to pass the Build Back Better plan.
Well, it's not. We're moving the Build Back Better along. This is the first major step. We have never, I mean, with all due respect to your characterization, we're in the best place ever today to be able to go forward. We have not had this level of progress in terms of where we are in Build Back the BIF, bipartisan infrastructure framework, what's called the Jobs Creation legislation, and the opportunity to have a path to build back better for women. And for women, because there's so much in there that is liberating for women in the workplace, and dads too, who have home responsibilities, whether it's child care, whether it's elder care and home health care, whether it's children learning, parents earning with the child tax credit that helps pay the bills, in so many ways. And of course, we're very proud of the fact that in this legislation, we have the opportunity for people in the 12 states that did not embrace the Medicaid provisions of the Affordable Care Act to be taken under the Affordable Care Act. This is transformational. And everything I mentioned is supported by Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema. Everything that I just mentioned. There's some things that they may add, subtract, or whatever, but over 90% of the bill was built House, Senate, White House. So if there are a couple things at the end that are different, we'll deal with those. But this is, again, transformative, historic, and again, this is two giant steps forward today.
But some voters are saying that the government, the Democrats are unable to get it.
No. Well, watch the vote when it comes up, okay?
But some voters think on Tuesday that the Democrats are really going to get anything done.
Thank you.
Okay.